All right, I think we've given folks enough time. Let's go ahead and kick this one off. So let's do Warpcast developer updates first, and then we'll touch on the Farcaster developer updates. So from the Warpcaster side, a couple of things. One, we've started work on the signer request flow. The good news is people are working on this actively. The less good news is there's a decent amount of complexity in the UI flow around how signers are approved and authenticated, and we want to make sure that experience is really good for people. And we've been spending a little more time making sure that the transition to the hashes, the hash migration, which we'll talk about next, are going to go well. So as a result of these two things, we want to push out the final launch of signer requests to March 31st. Which we think is a reasonable time to get this all done. So while we originally thought it was going to be 15th, the more likely date is going to be the 31st. And we're going to do everything we can to get it out sooner than that if possible. From the core design perspective, nothing materially has changed about this. The flow is just going to be, as we've talked about before, user can visit your application. You can give them a deep link into our app. They'll be able to approve something on a nice screen that kind of looks like this, where they'll be able to approve the message. And then you'll get the key back and you'll be able to like start broadcasting messages to our hub and posting everything there and landing everything well. Cool. Let me hit pause there. I know we've chatted with some of you offline about the timelines on this one, but I want to see if anyone has any questions or thoughts on this. Okay, cool. I'll keep rolling. Second one, the hash migration. So wanted to touch on this one really quickly. So we sent out a couple of timelines for feedbacks to a bunch of people, and I think we factored in feedback from Purple, from a bunch of other folks, and I think the final timelines that will make this easy for everyone is to actually do on March 1st, which was yesterday, we started accepting both hashes. So as of yesterday, the API is super open. You can send it a V1 hash or a V2 hash. It will return all the correct responses, and it will return in its response packet all the hashes as well. So it'll give you the old hash and the new hash, and kind of everything that worked before should continue working now. On March 14th, we'll make a small tweak. Everything will still return the same hashes, but the default hash value, the one that shows up in the hash field, will actually be the V2 hash. And the V1 hash will be stored secondarily on every response. So again, you can update your apps to read the old V1 hash if you need to, but the default option will be the V2 hash. The APIs will still accept both V1 and V2 hashes. They'll just return the older ones. And then finally, on March 21st, we're going to actually return the new hashes and the new hashes only, and we should be able to move forward with that. So on Warpcast web links, let me just double confirm with Shane. I believe they should all work because we already internally did some of the hash upgrades on our side. So we should be able to basically keep them cached and transfer them. So at some point we may like discard the old hash values, but call it for the next year or so, all the old links will keep working and keep translating from the old hashes to the new hashes. But any new links you generate will have the new hashes and they'll keep working. Cool. Again, we know this is kind of a difficult migration to do. This is like a one-time protocol change. And so let us know if these timelines are like tough for you, or if we get close to these deadlines and you need like a couple more days. We're happy to be flexible, but the sooner we can get this done, the faster we can move on to all the other things around hubs or signers. So we want to strike the right balance there. Cool. We've also updated the API docs, which are linked here. So if you click on this one, you should be able to see all the new responses. So Shane's actually done a great job of like adding all the different values. So you can see how you get the multiple different types of hash values here. And this is updated in every API response. So hopefully this gives everyone a lot of clarity on what exactly the return values are. The domain cutover should be done at this point. Shane can confirm if Farcaster.xyz is officially dead, but at this point, we've either just killed it or just about to kill it, and all API requests on the Warpcast API should be going to api.warpcast.com. Last point, a bunch of folks had asked about follows data and generally how we're thinking about that. So wanted to share like how Warpcast in particular is thinking about it. One, we don't think of this as proprietary data, so we want to like open it up, happy to open it up on the APIs, make it available to everybody. We do want to make sure we get the hubs out on the timeline that we've said. So any work to expose follows will happen after that. I still think our conviction is follows are not the right model for the protocol itself. And we've talked about that before. But in terms of like Purple and Discov and all these other clients getting access to our follows, we're very happy to make them available so you can bootstrap your initial follow graph, and so on. It is also very likely that just directionally, the way we're thinking about things at Warpcast is our feed is going to become more algorithmically driven and less follow based. So like stuff is going to enter your feed because you ended up, let's say, liking a bunch of posts from somebody, and it's not really an explicit follow. So over time, follows as a concept may end up making less sense for us, and we may be investing less in that feature. But all the data up until this point, and as long as we have follows, we're very comfortable exposing it to help other clients bootstrap and get started on the network. Cool. Any questions on any of that stuff? Sweet. Farcaster developer updates. So things have been moving pretty well over here. So one thing that's gone well is we've got one hub up and running in our infrastructure, and we've been throwing messages at it. And so far, everything looks pretty good and nothing is really broken. So we're pretty optimistic that things will keep rolling here well. We also have other people who've stood up hubs. So the way hubs work right now is they can store messages and receive messages and send them back to you, but they don't talk to each other. So we've actually had independent people set up their own hubs. I know the Purple team's been running a hub, or at least has one up and running. I know Pixel Pool has a hub up and running, and this is something you can do. It's not super useful right now, but you can at least test that it works and that everything is ready for when the data actually starts flowing. So that's actually gone pretty well. We've started work on actually getting all the peer-to-peer stuff done. We actually kind of started it 2 weeks ago, so we're like well in the middle of that, but that's also progressing pretty well, and we're making we're going to have that done by the end of this month as well, so people will be able to stand up their own hubs and peer and pull all of this data. One improvement we're making to the way signers work is we're actually adding this this notion of signer labels to the signers. And so the way this will work is every time you create a signer, so let's say you're an application, you ask the user for a signer so that you can post messages on their behalf, you'll be able to add a 32 character, well, technically 32 byte, but effectively 32 character string label that says, hey, this is from, you know, Purple or Discov or any other name that you would like. It's not a trustworthy name because you can obviously like spoof it in some sense, but the user does have to approve it. So when you put the signer label and say, I'd like to call this signer Purple signer, it goes to the user's phone. They see it. They see like, hey, I've got a request from Purple asking to sign a signer with the label Purple. And if they click accept, it gets authorized and it's on the network. So it's not completely trustable, but it's like mostly trustable in the fact that, you know, if you start faking it, most users will start rejecting it. And it provides it's a simple tool that provides a reasonable proxy for understanding, hey, what's going on in the network, where are different messages coming from? And it also makes it easy for users when they label their signers. Let's say they switch to a different wallet application. They're not using Warpcast and they want to manage their signers. They'll be able to see like, oh, this came from Purple, this came from Discov, this came from this other application, and they'll be able to know what to optimize for. Cool. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I guess real quick, does the user set the label or does the app set the label? Like, is it, yeah.
The way it works at the user flow is the app will set the label. The app will basically tell Warpcast, hey, this would be what I would like the key to be called, and this is the public key that I would like you to sign. We show that to the user, they click the button and they sign it and they produce it.
Cool, thanks.
Sweet. And then like more long-term, how we're thinking about the signer flow is like, one, we want it to be super open and permissionless. Like we never want Warpcast the client to be gating whether or not someone can ask a user for their access. That should kind of be permissionless. But over time, we also expect there to be like malicious behavior as somebody starts, you know, making websites to trick users into giving them signers. So we will likely introduce some notion of, it's kind of like when you download an exe from the web and run it on your desktop. If you've gone through some verification process, it'll run immediately. And you know, there'll be like a nice banner and it'll say like, here, this is from Purple, check mark, et cetera, et cetera. If we don't know who it is, we'll say, hey, this is unverified. You can click this button and you can authorize it, but you're attesting to the fact that you've done your due diligence and you feel comfortable with this decision. And whoever you give this key to will be able to post messages on your behalf. Right now, everything is kind of in like a similar model, but over time we'll say like, hey, if you want to like register and give us a name and a label and verify, then you can kind of get this nicer experience for your users and they'll be like, they'll see the app as more trustworthy now.
Yeah, Varun, if I might, we were actually talking about this a couple hours ago. It's like we're able to, like from the purple side, we're able to optimize right now for what we're going to do. And we think we have a pretty good idea of what WorkCast can do, but we have no idea what other clients are going to do. And so we have to like kind of going in like, what, unsure about what they're going to provide into the hubs, but we'll go with it and see what happens.
Are you talking about this in terms of like hub messages?
I'm just saying like, what's in their embeds or what kind of messages they're sending or what's in their links, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I think it's an open question on how different people construct and push data in. I think when clients start sharing norms around how they render data, like what do we do with embeds, for example, I think it'll start pushing a perspective on like, hey, this is how we'll structure things. This is how we'll make sure things show up in different parts of the application. Cool. Two shout outs. Shataro, who I don't think is on this call, but actually checked in a gas optimization that's going to cut down the registration of every name by 20K gas, which is awesome. So in around mainnet, it's actually going to be even cheaper to get F names. And Pixel has been doing a great job documenting Farcaster.js. So Farcaster.js is a library that makes it easier to work with hubs. So think of it as like ethers for working with hubs. And so he's actually done a lot of great work on making that easier to use there. In terms of help wanted and things that we could use support with, one is if you're interested in running a hub and I don't have you in the hub runners group already, just DM me on Telegram and I will put you in there. It should be pretty easy to set up. Like Dan was able to get a hub up and running in like 15 minutes on AWS, so you can do it if you want to. So if you've got some cycles, we'll be happy to help you get set up there. We've also said that a hub costs like $100 a month to run. That is a very conservative overestimate. I think you'll actually be able to run it much cheaper than that. But that is if you throw an M5 on AWS or equivalent at it, we 100% know it will run really, really smoothly. So there's probably something you can run a little cheaper than that as well. Exactly. The other thing is we have actually started doing a lot of work on the migration to mainnet. So you'll notice in this diagram, we actually have the contract 2.1 and the audit and mainnet migration on schedule. We don't have a final timeline for when this is going to kick in, but we're actively working on the contract and making improvements. And there's a bunch of open issues. So if you enjoy working on smart contracts and want to help us launch on mainnet faster, tons of open issues. And similarly, if you like working on hubs, we've actually had quite a few new contributors, including Peyton this week. So if you'd like to contribute, there's a bunch of open issues ranging from simple documentation stuff all the way to more meaty improvements on the hub. The last thing is we need some volunteers to test custody address rotation. This is kind of a Warpcast level feature. So on the Farcaster protocol, you can move your FID and FNAME between different addresses. And we've actually made some improvements to the Warpcast app so that if you actually move your address and FID on chain and you log in with the new address, the app will kind of work. There's still a few rough edges around it. Some of the old mentions don't work quite correctly, but we're going to fix up all these issues over time. But we're looking for some beta testers. So if let's say you had your seed phrase in LastPass and you're very concerned that it's going to get hacked and want to be on the bleeding edge of rotating out to a new address, hit me up. We would love to sit down and walk with one of you through the experience of transferring stuff and then make sure that it works. The experience on the Warpcast side is actually pretty straightforward, but the part about this that's really challenging, I don't know if any of you have ever tried to actually move stuff from one seed wallet to another seed wallet. Like most wallets like MetaMask actually make this really, really hard and complicated. So we've tried to write a guide to make it as easy as possible to use MetaMask to do this. Cool. That brings us to the end of the updates that we had here. Jason, I know we owe you a couple of answers. on the API request. I actually chatted with Shane about it right before this call, and so I'll add in the answers to the end of it. But TLDRs, I don't think any of those things would be a problem, and we should be able to address most of the things that Aman wanted. Cool. It's very sad that chat doesn't get recorded, so everyone who's watching this video later is going to be confused about why we pause and laugh every 30 seconds. Okay, folks. If that's it, we'll keep this meeting brief and we'll kind of hit wrap here. And we will talk to you all in a couple of weeks. And as usual, keep you posted with updates on the Telegram channel. For those of you at ETH Denver, have a great time, and we'll see you back soon.
Thanks, everyone. Good stuff.